Hi, I'm Jenny Luna, a producer on If Then. During our first season, we shared a variety of research on quite a few topics. We discussed everything from AI and decision-making to digital currency and power dynamics in groups. But we found something consistent when we asked each professor what brought them to their work, why they do their research in the first place. Many had similar answers. Today, on this special episode of If Then, we're bringing you a more personal side from our professors. Listen as we share clips of why they research what they research. In our episode, More Than a Feeling, The Keys to Making the Right Choice, we talked with Shiv, a professor of marketing at Stanford GSB. Shiv's research examines the interplay of the brain's liking and wanting systems and its implication for innovation and leadership. Here, he discusses what led him to his research. Here's Shiv and Kevin Kuhl.
So, Baba, why do you study decision-making? What led you to this area of research?
I am the most irrational of decision makers out there. And, most academics would say that you study your weaknesses. And my weakness is I'm very irrational as a decision maker in the sense that the rational thing to do is when you're making these very consequential decisions, you spend a lot of time deliberating on the decision, evaluate the pros and cons, talk to people, seek opinions, and make up your mind. Most of my consequential decisions, who I'm going to marry, for example, took me about 30 minutes to decide. My kind of career path was going along, becoming the CEO of a multinational company. And then one of my favorite professors in my MBA program, he kind of asked me a question, have you ever thought of becoming a professor? And I said, no, sir. He said, you should. And then 4.5 months later, he died in an air crash. And I go to his memorial and I ask people, hey, did he ever ask you to be a professor? No one said yes. And I said, maybe he saw something in me. That decision to quit my kind of career path of becoming the CEO of a multinational company, and I was going down that path, and I knew I could be successful there. To completely kind of abandon that and adopt a completely new course of action, not knowing what's going to happen. I didn't even know what a PhD was. That took me a couple of days. So I'm one of the most irrational of decision makers, and that's what got me to asking this fundamental question, and that is a good decision really based on reason, or is it based on emotion? And that's been the hallmark of a lot of the kind of work I do, asking these kind of fundamental questions where people have certain assumptions about human behavior, what is the appropriate thing to do, and I kind of question them and I say, why not the opposite?
To learn more from Shiv and how to, quote, think like an artist, tune into his episode from season 1. Mohammad Akbarpour is an associate professor of economics and researches market design. Akbarpour is particularly interested in understanding how the kidney exchange market, school choice system, and labor markets evolve, and how to improve their designs. Here's Mohammad Akbarpour sharing what drew him to study economics.
What drew you to, first of all, become an economist and to this research in particular?
The economics really came from the fact that I always loved mathematics. And I also loved looking at humans, reading novels, thinking about psychology. Brothers Karamazov was my favorite novel. And I realized that economics is somehow the right mix of thinking about humans and mathematics. I came to Stanford University as a PhD student in School of Engineering. And then I got a few economics classes and I fell in love with economics. And then I switched to economics. So that's how really it all started for me, thinking about economics. This particular research, I was uncomfortable by this assumption from day one. I saw it. This fact that the whole economics builds on the fact that moving $1 from A to B, or at least the whole Econ 101, is welfare neutral. And coming from Iran, I was kind of on the middle class myself, but I had a lot of family members in a really small city 5 hours away from the capital who were really, really poor. And it was so clear that like $1 to them is like significantly different than $1 to people that I was surrounded with in Tehran, in my university. So all of those really existed in my brain and I was uncomfortable with this question. And then with my two fantastic co-authors, they had different personal experiences, and we were talking about these topics. And we were like, do we want to commit the crime and do interpersonal utility comparison? Mm-hmm. And we wrote the papers. I do remember that when I told this to one of my friends, who is also an economist, he was like, I think with probability 5%, this paper is going to start a whole new way of thinking, and with probability 95%, people are going to laugh at you. And I was like, I would take that bet.
You'll take the 5%.
Yeah, I would take the 5%.
Yeah.
Life is too short to get the riskless papers.
Hear more of this conversation in our episode, Is Money Really the Best Measure of Value? In our third clip for today's episode, we'll share more from Kevin's conversation with Deborah Gruenfeld, a professor of organizational behavior at Stanford GSB. Deborah Gruenfeld studies power dynamics in groups. Like Suchi Wong, Baba Shiv, and many professors we spoke with on If Then, her research comes from a personal place.
I'm just curious, Deb, what drew you to this research in the first place?
So I've had a sense of myself as someone who kind of sees everything but doesn't feel empowered to do anything. It's been a personal struggle for me, just trying to find my own agency, I would say. Mm-hmm. Maybe because I'm a woman, maybe because I'm introverted, maybe because my dad was a Holocaust survivor, and I think some of his sense of powerlessness coming out of that trickled down in my life and in my family. But I do have this one very vivid example that came to me after I started to think a little bit about power from a job that I had before I went into academia. So I worked for a short time between college and graduate school in public relations. And I, as a very junior person, was an assistant to a publicist, and our client was Jan Wenner, who's the founder and publisher of Rolling Stone magazine. And he's a very powerful entertainment industry executive, and it was definitely the most famous person I had ever met at the time. And I went to a meeting in his office at 9:00 in the morning, and what happened in that meeting was really shocking to me. Having normal work conversations, he had a refrigerator right at the side of his desk, and he reached over and opened up the refrigerator and took out a bottle of vodka and took out a bag of onions. And while we were talking, just the way you and I are talking now, he took the lid off the bottle and drank vodka straight out of the bottle in the meeting and took the onions out and was snacking on onions. And I remember thinking, this is strange. I've never seen anything like this. I was looking at my boss. She wasn't reacting. He seemed to think it was perfectly fine. He didn't even offer to share anything with us. But it really was an event that, as I started to think about power, really struck me that there's something that happens to people in positions of power that leads them to stop self-regulating, stop trying to control their behavior in the ways that most of us are doing on a regular basis. And that was an intuition that I ended up doing a lot of work on, just trying to understand really the psychology of people in positions of power. And very much consistent with what we saw, we just tend to find that when you take a random sample of people from any population you can think of, students or participants in studies, all these are experimental studies that I did, and put them in some type of position where we've given them power over someone else in a totally arbitrary way, we find that they're just much more likely to act on whatever impulses they have. And this is true for anybody who we put in these situations.
To learn more about power dynamics and hierarchy, listen to our episode, Navigating Workplace Dynamics with Deborah Gruenfeld. Thank you for listening to this special episode of If Then. Stay tuned for more special content and for our second season. This episode was produced by H. Ash and me, Jenny Luna. Find more episodes of If Then on our website, our YouTube channel, or find them wherever you get your podcasts.